So the first thing I'll do now that I've have this clay stretched out is I'll take my metal rib that comes in the toolkit, this guy, and then I'll bend so it's at a curve, and I'll use this to compress the slab and get rid of any stretch marks. So I'm just going over it. If it starts getting a little dry and leaving a little bit of texture, just dip that metal rib in water, and that'll add a little bit of moisture to the slab and smooth it out a little bit more. So you can kind of see it's super smooth now, right? So after I've done that, now I'll flip it upside down and clean up the other side, which is a whole lot rougher. You can see all this here. I'm just gonna cut that off and not even use that section of it. That's just separated way too much. But all this in here I'll use pretty much for my slab cut. If you guys have any questions as I'm going, just feel free to unmute and ask. I'm gonna post a video of this section on the YouTube channel. Yep, you're welcome. Oh, I guess, would you guys prefer I just post all the videos in Canvas? Or both, or doesn't matter? Doesn't really, as long as I post it doesn't matter, yeah? Okay. Alright, so now I have this pretty cleaned up. What I'm looking for is to basically cut a rectangle out of this. So either with a ruler or with a board with a straight edge, I'll start cutting that down now. And even though I had the same problem this afternoon, I still don't have a ruler. I didn't go get one. So I'm going to use this wear board just that has a straight edge here and just use that as my edge. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want it somewhat even. So I'm just using this as a guideline. A ruler would be better, but like I said, you don't need it. You definitely don't need to go buy a ruler just for this. So now I have one right angle here at 90 degree, and then I have two parallel lines, and now I just need to kind of determine how wide I want this to be. You can do this a couple ways. You can do it freehand, like I'm gonna do it, or you could get any cylinder tube that's 100% symmetrical and not tapered. And you could wrap this with newspaper or paper towels and then roll this onto your piece. So you could use that as a template to then pull out and then have your cylinder, right? So you're free to do that if you want, or you could just freehand it like I'm gonna do it. Just remember, if you do use a form, wrap it in paper towels or newspaper. That's very important. Because if you don't and forget, the clay will stick to your tube that you're using, and it won't come off. It's just stuck. So clay, when it dries, it shrinks inward. It shrinks a little bit, right? So if it gets stuck on a piece and then it shrinks in, what's going to happen when it starts shrinking is that it cracks and then it breaks. To where if you put paper towel, newspaper in between, it'll act as a barrier and you'll be able to slide that piece out. All right, so here's my slab. It's a little bit on the thick side, a little bit more than 3/8 of an inch. What I'm gonna do now, unlike how Didam overlapped the two edges, so she wrapped it around and just put them like that to where they overlapped, I'm going to put a bevel in both sides, so when they come together they meet right up against each other, and I don't have to worry about thinning them out at all. So to do that, what I'm going to do is bevel the outside of one side and the inside of the other. And how I'm going to do that is just by using my index finger and thumb. I'm going to hold it and then pinch, but I'm only going to pinch with my thumb on one side, so that side bevels. All right, so I'm holding it and I'm going to pinch just on the inside, and you can see where it's beveled right there now, opposed to like right under it where it's not beveled at all. Okay, you guys all see that okay? Or no?
Yeah.
All right, cool, thank you. So now I'm just gonna move all the way down and do that same thing. So it's just a little pinch, and that just puts a bevel just on one side. It's basically like a 45-degree bevel without having to use like an X-Acto blade or bevel it. And now what I'm gonna do on the other side is bevel the outside, so when they come together, they overlap a little bit, but they meet perfectly. Okay, so same thing, just pressure on the outside and bevel down. So now there's a bevel on the inside and a bevel on the outside. And you know, this is just one way to do it. I talked a little bit last time about there's not a right and a wrong way to make objects. There's different ways. And there's easier ways and more difficult ways. So personally, I think this is an easier way to make it than overlapping them and then pinching it out and re-evening it. But if you feel like the other way is easier, by all means, like do it how Didam did it. And I am gonna try to post an announcement with some of the links to the videos I've shown that weren't me demoing, so you guys can look those up too. All right, so now I'm ready to score the inside and the outside where I put the bevels. So on the line where I beveled, that's where I'm using my scoring tool and scoring on both sides. So I'm just dipping my scoring tool in water, and that like makes a slip, which is liquid clay, from the clay in the slab. So I don't have to add slip, I'm making slip with my scoring. And now I'm ready to put these two pieces together. So I'm just slowly bending them in till they meet and just like loosely lining them up. Now, depending on how dry your clay is when you do this, you might get some cracking. And my clay is very dry. So I'm getting a lot of cracks, okay? Like fresher clay is more plastic and more bendable. If yours dries out like mine has, and you get this, it's fine. It's okay, but what you want to do is address it and fix that problem before it becomes a bigger problem. This is pretty extreme too, but all I'm gonna do is on these vertical cracks, is I'm gonna go across them horizontally and get them out just with my index finger. So I'm just gonna go across them to compress them out, to make sure my clay is still very strong even though I got these cracks. So as long as you address the problem, it won't be a problem later. You're basically fixing it. And then that gets rid of any score marks, okay? So I got more of those to do, but I'll just worry about those in a little bit. The other thing I need to do right now is where the seam is, I need to seal that. So what I'm gonna do is go down about halfway with my index finger on the outside and my thumb on the inside, and I'm just gonna pinch these together and move up, and then I'm gonna go across to blend this clay into this clay, and vice versa, go back and forth. So these two pieces of clay are now one piece of clay, and then after I've done half of it, I'll flip it upside down and I'll do the other half. And if you guys have any questions as I'm doing this, feel free to ask away in the chat or unmute yourself. Okay. So now I have like kind of my basic cylinder. It needs a lot of cleaning up at this point, right? It's really rough still. But I'm just gonna go around, pinch out the edges. This is gonna be my top, I think. And then I'm gonna go around and work all over the whole circumference of the piece to get rid of any cracks, to smooth it out however I want. On the seam, if you want to make it perfectly smooth, again, use your metal rib and then bend that and use that to scrape and clean. Okay. And let's just, you know, I could spend like 2 hours just cleaning this piece, like in all honesty, which could get boring to watch because it's the same repetitive thing over and over and over again. So let's pretend I'm happy with it. Let's just pretend I'm happy, okay? Now at this point I'm gonna attach a bottom because there's no bottom. It's just a hollow tube. So from some of my other excess slab that's the same thickness, I'm gonna use this as my base. So all I'm gonna do is take this, put it on top of this slab, and then trace around, okay? So with your pin tool or an X-Acto blade, you can use this to trace. And now you have a base that's cut out exactly the right size, okay? And now from this point, you can score the bottom of the base and score the bottom of the cup. So those two pieces are scored, and then when you put them together, they'll be locked really well. So I'm just gonna score all around the surface here. And this is where like having a good scoring tool really comes in handy, really saves you a lot of time. So that's very scored. Now I'm gonna do the same to the bottom of this cylinder. And I'm dipping it in water to create a slip as I'm scoring. Remember, in Arizona, it's very, very dry here. So we need to compress. Compress, compress, compress. That's the most important thing. All right, so we got the bottom score and the bottom score. Now they're ready to be put together. So I'm gonna line them up correctly. Now I'll give a little shake like that. A little tap. Now the base is like attached pretty well just from that, okay? It's just like gravity and pressure. That's doing its thing pretty well. From this point, what I'm gonna do is now I'm gonna blend the bottom slab up. So this clay comes into the wall up top. I'm gonna use the footing tool or a footing tool. Like there is one that comes in the basic pottery tool kit, but it has a little bit more of a rounded edge on the bottom. And you use that smaller rounded edge opposed to like your thumb and using your thumb to bring it up. You could use this tool and just use this to like bring that clay up and blend it together. Okay. So now at this point, the cylinder, it's all connected well. It needs cleaning, right? So I could take a rasp tool, this guy that's like a cheese grater, and I could use this to shave down the clay. I could let it set up and use my metal rib more. You can kind of see like the little kind of clay gratings that happen from using a rasp tool. It'll take off a lot of clay very quickly. You don't need to do that, but it is like candy if you really are a perfectionist that need to get those walls really smooth, okay? And then, you know, if you do use a rasp, then you go through with your metal rib and use that to smooth a little bit more. You can see how like really smooth it gets from just doing those two little simple things opposed to like the other side where it's really rough. All right. So we're like fast forwarding in the future. We've worked on this like a half hour, an hour. We've really smoothed it out, spent time on it. We're happy with the shape, okay? So that's where we're at right now. And at this point, we'd be ready to add underglaze to it. So I have just an Amico Velvet white underglaze that I'm gonna use because this is a very dark red recycled clay. So if I put black on it, it's gonna be like a dark brown and a black when I fire it. But if I put a white, it'll be a dark brown with like a white to contrast it. And usually with underglazes, no matter what brand you're using, Amico, Duncan, Mako, Speedball, those are the main ones that are around here. They take 3 layers generally to get it thick enough to where it's a solid color like that you would paint on. So I'm using a watercolor flathead brush that's like 1 inch. You could use any brush that you have laying around. Any brush is fine. And then I'll just paint one coat. I'll just do it on one little section here. You can see like how you could still kind of see through it, right? It's still got streaks. It's not all the way solid. So what you do is you paint it all the way around and then let that dry for a little bit, then paint another coat, paint another layer, let that dry, then paint another layer, a 3rd layer, and let that dry, and then it'll be solid. If you want it solid. If you're like, do 1 layer and you're like, I really like seeing the clay through the underglaze, I like seeing the streaks, I wanna see what that's gonna look like on a finished piece, then just do 1 layer and see what it's gonna look like. And then next Tuesday, I'm gonna show you some decorating techniques. So some of you will be to the point where yours is ready to be decorated and carved, and others of you, you know, that are waiting for clay still might not be there. That's okay too, as long as you know how to get there. That's what's important, okay? And that's pretty much the basics of like a slab cup with underglaze.